Hello there, my fishy friends. My name is Peter, and today is another installment of my Coho fishing educational series, aimed, generally speaking, at weeding people off of flossing and snagging their fish, because I would like to do my part to help the new anglers on this river find the good ways to land fish. The spot I'm fishing here is not really a great Coho spot. The water here is a bit too fast. But I like filming where I'm away from other people, so I'm fishing a really marginal spot. I don't expect there to be a fish sitting here, but I'll fish anyway. It's a little bit more fun than just sitting there staring into the camera and talking to myself. When I first started fishing this river, I was 100% convinced that these salmon don't bite. That once they enter fresh water, they stop eating, and therefore they stop biting. And I kind of thought that the people who are catching lots of fish were just really good at flossing. So there's a saying about Coho. They say that Coho bite best right before you show up to the river, and then again right after you leave. So some days it certainly seems like that's true. But in this installment, we're just going to look at the reasons they bite. So by far, the most common reason and the main reason that salmon bite in fresh water, even though they are not eating anymore, is an egg crushing instinct. So salmon wants to destroy the competition for their own fry to survive better. So when they see something floating by them that looks like a salmon egg, they go up, they crush it, and they spit it out. So that's what we're taking advantage of, is that egg crushing behavior. And we're taking advantage of that to catch our fish. So one way to do that is to take cured salmon roe and present them with that. Another way is to take a bead, so a soft bead like this, and that also resembles a salmon egg. So what's the difference? Well, I find that with the roe, they hang on to it a bit longer. They grab it and they chew on it, where with the bead, they grab it and they spit it out. So with a bead, you either have to get lucky. When they grab it, they hook themselves, or you have to be super fast on your response, where with the roe, you just get that extra second to try and get a good hook set on that fish. What I do, usually I switch it up. So for a while, a bead fish, and I slide the bead out of the, a roe fish, I slide the bead out of the way. Then I take the roe off, slide the bead down, and bead fish for a bit. So you'll see me with this combination a lot. I have a small soft bead on there, but it's out of the way, and then I'll be fishing a little bit of roe. So these fish, they don't really remember what roe looks like. They just have this instinct that they want to grab it. So they maybe vaguely remember from when they were a smolt in the river that what roe looks like, but really they haven't seen it in a bunch of years. So you're not trying to actually imitate an exact salmon egg. You're just trying to give them something that's going to make them respond. And sometimes those are big beads. Like I've caught lots of Coho on big, like 15, 20 millimeter beads. Sometimes it's big chunks of roe. Like these clusters of roe don't actually exist in nature. There's nothing like it. When salmon lay eggs, they're single eggs. But still, they kind of remember, it's round, we got to bite it. And so when I'm fishing, yeah, most of my fish, about 80% I catch fishing roe, and the rest using beads and spoons and spinners. So yeah, number one reason Coho bite is an egg crushing instinct. The second most common instinct that they have is Coho bite out of predatory instinct. So ever since they were a little smolt, a little fry emerging out of the gravel, they've had to eat to survive. So they are predatory fish. They snap at everything, and that's been their life for the last 4 years, right? They've eaten. Even though they're no longer eating, they still want to grab stuff. It's kind of like, I always think about it like a cat. A cat isn't trying to eat something, really. They just want to play with it. They want to pounce on it. That predator part of them doesn't entirely go away. And so the way I kind of like to think of it, we think of them as river fish, but really Coho salmon are pelagic fish. So they are an open ocean species. They live in the open ocean. And out in the ocean, what happens every single night is all the bait fish come up at night out of the depths, and then as dawn comes, the predatory fish are underneath those bait fish and they pick him off. So they look at a silhouette, they look up and they see the bait fish and little squid and little krill that have come up from the deep. They pick him out against the dawn light, against the surface, and they grab them. So that's how they eat. So a coho has been eating breakfast at dawn every day of its life. So when you're fishing for them in the river, to take advantage of that predatory instinct, it's definitely good to get them in the twilight, whether it's evening or morning. Twilight fishing tends to be the most productive. But also you want to take advantage of that predatory instinct. So what makes a predatory fish strike usually is they're looking for something weak, something injured, something dying. It's a much easier meal for them. So the way we do that for coho is mostly using spoons, spinners, and jigs. And spoons and spinners, that's pretty obvious. You just spin cast. Jigs, so spoons and spinners imitate an injured bait fish. And it can be super effective if the fish are in there. Yeah, it's a great way to fish. When I'm striking out on roe, if I haven't had a bite in like a half an hour on roe, I switch to usually twitching jigs and then maybe spoons and spinners. Some people catch all their coho on spoons and spinners. It just depends on how you like to fish. Spoons and spinners in a river tend to be a little bit more expensive because you end up losing gear, and then it really adds up. Spoons and spinners are close to $10 now, so if you lose 5 of those in a day, it hurts the pocketbook a little bit. Twitching jigs also resemble an injured animal, but they usually resemble an injured squid. So squid in the open ocean, they kind of pulse. And in the ocean, if something's falling down, it's because it's injured or dying. So when you're twitching a jig, you want it to go up and then fall straight down, and they usually smash it right as it's falling down. It's that predatory instinct. They just kind of can't help themselves. They just want to snap at it. So when you're twitching, you want to be above the fish, not below them, because they're looking up for that prey. And you want to just drop the jig down to almost to where the fish are and then up, and then it needs to make this hopping motion. And again, it's like a dying squid, that's what they think it is, and they grab them. Jigs are amazingly productive sometimes, but jigs can also be very destructive to the fishing run. So if you have people, there's a big school of fish holding in a pool, and if you twitch a jig right through that school, you're gonna end up with foul hooked fish. And jigs have big hooks and sharp hooks. You're gonna get belly hooked fish, and it injures them unnecessarily. So for that reason, I tend to limit my twitching to when the fish are sparse in the river. So if I have a big run and there's a fish here, fish there, I can cover a lot of water with a twitching jig and maybe entice a bite. But I don't do it when there are big schools of fish. When there are big schools of fish, I tend to float roe, because the roe actually kind of hides the hook, and it makes it far less likely that you're gonna end up with a foul hooked fish. So those are 2 reasons. Egg crushing instinct, predatory instinct. And a lot of people will tell you the 3rd main reason is aggression. That these fish are snapping at small bait fish, they don't like other fish, they're aggressive. In my 10 years of snorkeling this river and swimming with these fish and filming them, I have never observed them being aggressive. There are little salmon smolts swimming right next to them, right behind them. They're leaving them alone. They're also swimming together with other species. Like, you can see coho, chinook, and chum swimming right side by side, right next to each other. They're not aggressive until they start spawning. Once they dig a nest called a red, once they're on the red, then they get very aggressive and they defend that red from other salmon, and then they chase trout away from those reds. They don't want their own eggs eaten, so they do get aggressive, but not until they're spawning. And at that point, usually you don't want to catch them, you want to leave them alone. And also by that point, they usually have given up on biting altogether, so it's not really an issue. I think the main reason, the 3rd reason that they bite, is just curiosity. So all predators are somewhat curious by nature. It helps them survive. And when coho see something that they haven't seen before, they investigate it by biting at it. So it's kind of a curious thing, right? I mean, it makes sense. Nick Bassick down at Chilliwack Art and Tackle, he says this all the time. Well, fish don't have hands. They can't grab something to see what it is, so they use their mouth to investigate. So curiosity is important. When you're trying to catch fish, if you want to use that curiosity to try and make them bite, you have to show them something that's maybe kind of flashy and something that they haven't seen before. So if everybody's tossing pink beads and you show them a green one, sometimes you'll get a bite. If everybody's floating roe and you toss a bead in there, well, maybe you'll get a bite. You just have to show them something different, something that they're a little bit curious about. Same thing with jigs. If you have 5 people twitching blue jigs trying to get a coho, you throw an orange one on there, maybe you're the one that's going to get a bite. People think they're fishing for like 3 or 4 fish in a run and that they're going to get a fish to bite. There are way more fish than that. When I snorkel, if you've watched my videos, you know, there are hundreds of fish sitting there. Sometimes in a run, you can have 200-300 coho sitting in there, and 90% of those coho will not bite. But then there's that 5 to 10% of them, they just feel like it, and yeah, you'll get your bite. So those are the 3 main reasons why coho bite. There might be other ones, but egg crushing, predatory instinct, and curiosity. It pays to experiment, and it pays to cover all 3. So when I'm fishing for coho, to get the most out of a run of fish that are sitting there, I try for all 3. So I'll try roe, I'll try beads. If that's not working, then I show them spoons, spinners, jigs, try and get a predatory bite. If that's not working, you just show them something weird, you know, experiment. Show them something green or purple or yellow, and just try and get that curiosity response. And if none of those things are working, don't get frustrated and don't start trying to snag your fish. It really, I don't know how to explain it properly, but coho are finicky biters. They're very easily spooked. So sometimes if the water is clear, you can see the coho and they can see you, and then they get spooked and they're not going to bite. Also at some of the meat holes where there are a lot of people fishing, there's splashing, there's talking. A little thing like a couple of floats plonking into the water are enough to spook a school of coho. So that's one thing that a lot of people really underestimate. They're like, these fish are there, why are they not biting? Well, in a river that's as heavily pressured as the Vetter, most of the day the coho will not bite. But that doesn't mean that they don't. You just have to experiment, try a bunch of different things. And sometimes you get 10 coho in an hour, and sometimes you get none all day. It's just the way it is. Don't get frustrated with it. You're not gonna get a fish every single time you go out. But once you get good at eliciting these bites, it's a lot more fun than trying to floss them. So I was flossing when I started fishing this river, but there are a whole bunch of problems with flossing. I might do a separate video on that. I don't want to go into it, but it's a lot of fun. You get to experiment and you get to catch a lot more fish. That's the main thing. I mean, I'm not really a talented angler. I would say I'm kind of middle of the pack. I'm not particularly talented. I've only fished this river for 10 years. And of those years, maybe my first 5, I wasn't even doing it right. I was mostly flossing. And so realistically, I've only spent the last 5 years really trying to figure out how to make coho bite. So I'm not that good at it yet. And still, like last season, I don't know if I want to say. I guess maybe I will. It's really dangerous to compare numbers with somebody else because I'm local and I fish like during coho season, during October, I probably fished 2 hours every day. So that's about 60 hours of coho fishing that I do in the month of October when it's most productive. And last year I got 60 coho landed, and the year before that 80. And every single one of them bit my hook. They were not flossed fish. So, you know, for a relatively inexperienced angler to get that many fish. It's totally doable, and it's a lot of fun, and I hope I'm going to do a couple more videos along these lines, and I hope you learn something from me. And hopefully, if it persuades even one person to stop flossing and try and figure out how to make coho bite, it'll make me happy. Thanks for watching. See you next time.